Now we are going to turn to what I suppose in some ways could be construed as the main event, which is to speak with Maurizio Montalto and his new colleagues, the fellows who have been gathered here. So just to introduce Maurizio briefly before I hand it over to him, he of course is the artistic director of Design Academy Salak in 2020. He holds master's degrees both from the University of Bologna and also from the celebrated Design Academy in Eindhoven. And his particular interest is, well, he'll say a bit more about it, but it's really in the area of biodesign and in particular the possibilities of a material called mycelium, which as far as I'm concerned is basically mushrooms or fungus, but he understands it much better than I do. And he's been pursuing those interests through a couple of different pathways, including his design studio, which is called Officina Corpusculae, which is based in Amsterdam, and also a private manufacturing company called Mogu. So Maurizio, welcome. Great to have you there in Salak. And we need to hear you, actually. You're still muted. Yeah. And we are now going to have the pleasure of being introduced to the first cohort of fellows there at dieDAS. And Maurizio will first introduce the 5 of them. And then the plan is for each of them to present a little bit of their own work. And then we'll have a group discussion. So Maurizio, while we're waiting, Arne, could you just say a little bit about how you came to be working with Maurizio and how he was selected as the artistic director?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned during my little presentation earlier, we had a very inspiring first walk and talk event here live on site in the fall of 2019. And Maurizio was one of the celebrated designers that we were very happy joined us. We have a very well connected and networking director of programs, Tatjana Sprick, who recommended we invite Maurizio to that event. And we just hit it off immediately. There were very stimulating conversations, and we were very honored that he was interested in the, at that time, a year ago, still very rudimentary vision of what we're actually going to be doing here and what we're setting up. And that over the past year, together with Maurizio and Tatjana, we have really managed to, I think, put some serious content into the dieDAS initiative. And I think all of us now much more or much better understand what we can actually accomplish here. And I'm saying this honestly because I'm also a little proud of what we've done together. And it moves me that there are so many insightful, energetic, and intelligent people who are keen on supporting the endeavor that we have here, and that don't shy away from the history of this complex property, but that actually, like us, understand that it's important, especially in a place like this, to move forward with the vision and the ideas that we have. So Maurizio has been a very important part of the development of the content of the fellowship program for this year, but I think also of the fellowship program in itself as an idea for the future of the dieDAS Academy. And here we see I see the fellows now lined up.
Practically, you should be able to hear me.
And we hear everything excellent.
Fantastic.
Great. Okay. So Maurizio, please go ahead and introduce.
Apologies for the little glitch. Everything runs well now, and I won't take up too much time right now in order to actually give space to everybody. Thank you, Glenn, for having introduced me, and Arne for having filled up to that. Indeed, I can just say the fact that through my practice, Officina Corpusculi, that is a practice based in Amsterdam, I had in time the chance to initiate different projects focused on the study and development of wide-ranging mycelium-based materials, technologies, and in general, as part of the studio activities, I tend to reflect on different contemporary issues related to material culture, as well as on the relationship between human and non-human agents to explore the relational complexity of the dynamic ecosystem we belong to. So having had the chance to develop not only a practice-based studio, but also to expand this experience towards industry, and to also infuse this with the chance to be active in education through different frameworks in art academies and universities. Today, I feel extremely privileged to have been assigned the opportunity to lead this foundational year of dieDAS and to set its tone and scopes from a creative perspective. And this together with a fantastic group of selected fellows who are here sitting next to me, namely Sasson Rafailov, Svenja Keune, Basse Stittgen, and Talin Hazbar. And it is my pleasure now to immediately pass the mic straight to them for a short introduction about their background, and then we'll come back to me so that I will have the opportunity to explain you a little bit more about this year topical framework and program. Sasson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sasson. I'm a designer and a historian in training, if you will. My work mainly focuses on design pedagogy and trying to establish basically a new paradigm for design education that helps us deal with the changing planet and the sort of problems of the 21st century.
Could you allow, please, screen sharing?
Everyone should be able to share the screen.
So Maurizio is pulling up a project of mine that I finished a couple of years ago, and this is sort of a sculptural investigation into design pedagogy. I created a few pieces that deal with various curricula that sort of try to embody the curricula of an influential school in the practice. So this is a project that I hope to pursue because I feel the question of design pedagogy is very important. But that sort of craft focus, that idea of making history, is something I actively pursue in my work. And that is mainly through a focus on sort of fundamentally understanding materials and understanding how they've been crafted and understanding the people that have worked with them in the past. So here on the left, we see a project that is an investigation into ash glazes. I collected sort of waste from wood kilns in Buffalo and attempted to make a stable glaze that you could eat off of and enjoy through a form that's inspired by a history of craft practice in Japan. And the glaze on the left is also inspired by that same investigation. I also work in wood and various other materials. And again, this is a dedication to craft, to sort of folk expression and the form that is almost a result of that practice. And finally, I also practice fine woodworking and furniture making as an expression of material and personal design ideology. So with that, I'll pass it to Svenja.
Yeah, hi, I'm Svenja Keune, and I think Maurizio will start my short presentation just in a second. So yeah, I'm from Germany, but I live in Sweden since 5 years and did my PhD there at the Swedish School of Textiles in Borås in Sweden. And yeah, did there or was there a research fellow within the Arkintex ETN. And now I'm actually just starting as a postdoctoral researcher at again, the Swedish School of Textiles, but also CETA, the Center for Information Technology and Architecture in Copenhagen in Denmark. And I have a background in textile design and always tried to explore the potentials of communication with textiles, based also on technology. And within my doctoral studies, I was very much inspired by seeing seeds as some kind of microcontroller. So I decided to to focus on textiles, not anymore with electronics, but then using seeds as a dynamic material for textile design. And that resulted in a couple of experiments. And yeah, we just quickly go through a couple of images of this project, which is, by the way, called On Textile Farming. So these are just a few impressions of the textile work that I've been doing, mainly based on woven structures and then integrating seeds in different ways. I think there is a problem with the PDF, but yeah. Okay, it's just, can you go back one slide? Yeah, and so one part of the project was seeing seeds as a dynamic material for textile design. But then I also decided to live together with my research experiment. So yeah, I built a tiny house on wheels and then moved in with my research to actually explore how those experiments and textiles influence my everyday life. And within that exploration, I think it's okay. So here you can see some more images, and this is then my final PhD thesis work, which you can see here. And yeah, during the whole experimentation and living with my research, I also encountered lots of other living organisms, not just plants, but also textiles, encountering the textiles. And I documented all this in my research notebook, or yeah, research diary. And this was actually the basis of the next project, which yeah, has now started in September. And this is called Designing and Living with organisms. So I will look into how we can actually design together, cohabit together with other organisms based on textiles and additive manufacturing, but also within my own everyday life in the tiny house. And yeah, for me, it's a continuous journey of exploration. And yeah, I finish with this picture because yeah, at this very moment, my house is actually moving to Copenhagen, which is another reason that I'm very nervous at the moment, because it's quite a tricky journey. Okay, then I will hand over.
Hi, my name is Basse, and I think my practice in the recent years can be summed up with the presentation that Maurizio just opened. And I'm going to show 3 projects that I somehow sum up with under the sentence "matter out of place," which is inspired by the sentence from Mary Douglas out of the book Purity and Danger, where she describes dirt as matter out of place. And I got really interested in the idea of changing the context and the status of matter and how I could create narratives through that. So the first project that I want to show is about eggs. And yeah, the egg in itself is a very innocent object, also in its symbolical meaning, but there's a side of industrial farming that actually produces worldwide 1.1 trillion eggs, which is paired with the fact that around 30% of all food produced is lost in production or wasted afterwards. So I try to do a project on this and find a way maybe how I can work with the eggs, and also how to address this topic, and also the invisibility of somehow how things are produced. So what I did is I developed a bioplastic that is made 100% out of eggs, and you can see it here. It consists out of dehydrated egg white and eggshells that are crushed up and mixed together and pressed. And the protein contained in the egg white actually forms this bioplastic. And the eggs that I'm using for the project are actually the ones that you see here in this picture, which are ones that actually never make it into the shells because they are deformed or they're damaged. But so I try to create this narrative and also connect again a little bit the production and the consumption, which I think is really important, because in general, industrial agriculture became very invisible, and the consumer is really disconnected to the production, and that makes it very difficult to have a discussion about the ethics of the whole production. So another project, here you can see some of the objects that I make out of it. So I make egg cups in a way that then the content becomes the container, and it's also just tableware that is made 100% out of discarded eggs. And through that, I try to physicalize this invisible waste. And the next project is one that is started out as a design or product design project, but then changed after a reflection on the whole industry of industrial cattle farming. And what I did is I developed a series of objects that is made out of the blood from the animals that usually gets discarded or becomes a byproduct in various different sectors, ranging from fertilizer to both animal and human food, and also pharmaceuticals. But none of those applications actually relate to the animal. Not even the meat so much is still related to the animal. It's packed up nicely and in plastic, and you get it at the supermarket. And as a consumer, you don't really have to be confronted with the realities of industrial farming. So what I did is that I collected this blood at the slaughterhouse, and I dehydrated it, and through a process of pressure molding and heat, I formed those objects that also consist 100% out of blood. And I create installations out of it that relate to the consumption and the overconsumption of the animal. And this is another piece of the series, which is a record that is made out of blood that plays the heartbeat of a cow. So with this piece, it encompasses a lot of the research actually that I've been working on, also in the symbolical meaning of blood, that it can represent life and death actually simultaneously. So the idea was to put the signal of life on this dead material. And I think in general, there's a lot of like cultural meaning attached to blood that has a very human view, and the animal view is not really part of it. But I also, in the next project that I want to show, it's actually about human blood, but my personal opinion is that it doesn't really make sense, or it's unethical to make objects out of human blood when you could maybe also donate it. But there are certain people that are not able to donate their blood because they carry infectious diseases in it, and actually then people also get stigmatized for their blood. So in this project, the intention is to see a disease not only as a medical status, but also as a social stigma, and also to address that stigma, and maybe to create a dialogue to break that stigma. So what I did is I made a series of objects with the blood of people that are HIV positive. And through the process that the material goes through, the objects become completely sterile. And it's possible to engage with it actually. And the objects are paired with interviews that I conducted with the donors, where they tell about their experience and their life actually living with this disease and what it means. Because I think considering those perspectives really can help to not stigmatize and to be open and to be also careful with each other. So with all those projects, I try to take a different angle and to tell a story that is maybe untold, and create awareness for things that might remain unseen. So that's it.
Hello, my name is Talin, and I'm originally Syrian, and I grew up in United Arab Emirates. My practice, I studied architecture, and my practice revolves around exploring the notion of impermanence. And in the first project, I'm kind of exploring the idea of creating something with a moldless approach, where the mold and the material become kind of one, and it allows for a material kind of contingency to kind of exist and kind of be the same. And in here we can kind of like see how through the moldless approach, material can actually expand and grow within its own like material and its own place. And I've explored like different kind of way of solidifying sand, and they were kind of like, we'll go through them quickly. So these are different kind of typologies and ways of molding and solidifying sand with its own kind of mold. Yeah, so these are kind of different approaches of applying the adhesive over like a sand surface and a sandbox. Then the other notion, I mean, the other projects as well, if we go through, which is transient, is also kind of exploring the notion of travel and space and time, where I was kind of like dealing with moving two materials between sand and ceramic between UAE and France. And it's about kind of the archaeology process and the restoration and what happens in a place and how it transient or kind of move from one state to another, and all kind of like the process that goes in between. Where I worked with like a group of archaeologists in a certain location, and then we were kind of exploring the different kind of techniques and method they use, and what does it mean to restore, and how much we can restore and how much we can reveal in an archaeology site. And as well, like how ceramic can actually convey and preserve that memory of a place and a moment. And through different kind of like installation, it was kind of like made with these kind of sand, similar way and process they use in the archaeology kind of restoration process by mixing it with straw and other material and aggregates, and kind of combining the ceramic with the actual kind of trying to merge two materials that kind of try to preserve each other. So where sand, as much as like in its site and its kind of location, it tries to preserve the archaeology and the site itself. The more you kind of dig inside, the more you kind of exposing those surfaces to kind of ruin the data or ruin those kind of like archaeology information that every site has. The other kind of project as well, goes back to the kind of the notion of the impermanence of having structure that is very prominent in the Syrian courtyard, which is a fountain, and how we kind of like relate to fountain structure because of their water, because they were in history, it had kind of like a very relevant kind of function, but then through time, the function becomes kind of more decorative, but people still relate to it because there's so many kind of conversation that has been kind of hidden, and the noise, it was kind of a great noise barrier, but it's still like it's made out of water. It's a great kind of tool to gather and have kind of a gathering spot inside the courtyard. Where as well, like it has a lot of kind of political impact as well, and political kind of way, like who gets the water from the main source and who doesn't, and who has this ability to kind of like enjoy this kind of luxury of having a water feature with a tile and like all these kind of elements within within a space. So these are just kind of different profiles are found in Syrian courtyards. And what I've tried to do in an exhibition is to kind of document what are the most kind of prominent profiles around Syrian courtyards, and then try to kind of segment them so they're not anymore just kind of a communal or a central space, but it's more of quarters that are spread around in a space, and we're kind of moving around them, and we're kind of trying to be part of that water flow. So it's not anymore a place that we go to and we gather, but it's more like us being part of that conversation and kind of trying to as well notice these kind of different profiles, and what each profile kind of like each kind of fountain would have a completely different sound as well. And it was interesting to see how every person kind of relate to it differently because of the noise of the water and something that we can't actually touch. The last project, which I'm kind of like working on it as well, it's working with fishermen in Sharjah and trying to understand the industry, the fishing kind of like fishing, and like how the elements that by weaving and the techniques they use by having like fishing baskets dipped in the water, and then what is the impact of having those kind of nets in the ocean, and then how can, and they're also like interesting how the adaptation that happens when as soon as like a man-made structure is put inside the water, and how nature takes over and then try to grow and adapt to that space. And then what can we also like use those materials that are grown on these nets and reuse them again, or how can it be kind of helpful to the industry, and just kind of questioning that kind of cycle of the state of in-between, and how we can, like the cyclical notion of growing something and then coming back to it, and then what does it mean? Yeah, so that's... Yeah, those are just some images. Thank you.
Maurizio?
Right. Thank you so much, guys. I'm just trying to share screen again, and here we go. Just give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay, can you see my screen? So thanks a lot, guys, for this introduction of your works, which I think really helps contextualizing the reasons for you to be here. In fact, what we are taking a look at right now are some of the key notions and the key values of what dieDAS is, and we can realize quickly how interconnected they are with one another and how related they are also to the nature of your practice and your projects. What I would like to do today is to introduce all our audience to the topical framework of this year, of this debut fellowship 2020 of dieDAS, by using questions rather than trying and attempt to provide established answers, and to look together at where it all originated in the first place, to then conduct you through the actual program, how it manifested, and then reflect on the different notions that derive from the many encounters and explorations that we have experienced during this past week together. Following that, I'll be glad to give the stage back to the fellows who will tell us a little bit more about their experience, and to open up the dialogue together with Glenn in a conversation with the audience in a more interactive manner. So as part of the debut fellowship 2020, I decided to place the focus on a subject that has proven very dear to contemporary designers and practitioners, whose sensitivity appears to be increasingly characterized by an overall resonance with urgent contemporary challenges, and particularly with topics that relate to sustainability and environmental responsibility. Hence, the focus has been placed on the exploration of bottom-up creative approaches to envision the possibility of materializing new materials, new processes deriving from a thorough understanding of the local ecology and the deriving functioning of the related ecosystem dynamics. So as we know, I just take a step back, design used to be conceived as the discipline that could solve problems by producing new products. So we are all familiar with that. And we are here looking at fantastic, iconic pieces among the many. These are just some examples that emerged in different historical periods. However, we know that by creating more things, more consumer products, not necessarily of such high value as the pieces I'm showing here, more chairs, lamps, toasters, and the likes, well, it has clearly revealed not to be the way to solve the majority of today's most urgent challenges, as such overproduction and the material culture surrounding it is indeed to be found at the very origin of the ecological problems that we're facing today, and designers are certainly responsible for that. We have already designed a human-centric material world that is focused on consumers' needs and wants. And as a result, this very system of industrial production, together with all its related functioning, has contributed to causing a lot of the complex social and ecological imbalances that we are facing. So the question is, how can designers use their skills to address and start tackling these issues effectively? As designers, we always want to use and further develop different design methods to address the difficult issues that have no easy answer, as we hold a fundamental responsibility in relation to the act of shaping the world and making a difference, and to promote the advent of effective societal change, with the intention generally also of trying to transition away from fossil fuel resources to generate resilient systems that can react and adapt to sudden changes, to develop system thinking, to visualize data, and to find new ways to regenerate ecosystems. This actually while also engaging with our surroundings and with the others at all levels, let them be other fellow humans or other fellow living agents. These are all manifestations that are expressed nowadays in a plethora of recent curatorial projects. I just showed you, for instance, Broken Nature, that is very symbolic in this regard. So generally, actually, we always try to connect knowledge from different fields, trying to approach such processes in the most thorough transdisciplinary manner, with the ambition of linking biology, chemistry, physics, social sciences, ecosystemic sciences, and the likes. And such act of connection means that we must, of course, commit to learn about fields that we are not experts on. However, and as designers, and more in general as humans, we have a tendency towards control. We must realize that through our actions, we are affecting everything, that's for sure, but we are not controlling everything. A lot of the problems that we are facing today are in fact the results of our previous design decisions. And now it's time to think in more than human-centric frames and become aware of the political agency that design has, while striving to understand the agency also of all the others, as for instance, the other than human living systems. I'm talking here about plants, microbes, and so on, as all living systems have their own agency. So we need to rethink how design can be of service for the others, and of course, not only for the future of our human short-term goals, but to the benefit of future generations as well. Along the past decade, there's been many design research-driven projects that have manifested and that tend towards the exploration and the creation, in short, towards the design of alternative materials that would not compete and negatively challenge the rhythms of the ecosystem we are all part of. Projects that incorporate or develop processes, materials, products that are naturally resonant and that could allow cycling and reintegration and regeneration without damaging the functioning of the ecosystem. On the contrary, enriching it. And there's plenty of publications and fantastic exhibitions all around collecting all such perspectives. In fact, where does this derive from? It appears clearly that we are facing the emergence of a radical paradigm shift in design in regard to how we produce materials for the construction of our very habitat. If the period of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th century has resulted in a shift initially from a regenerative practice very much an agrarian practice to a non-regenerative material, and I go back, material source, such as mines, fossil fuel extractions, and overall exploitation, our time seems to be experiencing the very reverse process. So a shift towards cultivating, breeding, raising, farming, call it as you wish, growing future resources that can go hand in hand with a reorientation of biological production, production methods, and overall goals. So as we all know, agricultural products tend to be mostly associated with food and with the food industry. However, as opposed to that, we have been witnessing the unfolding, and in some cases, the further development of a wide array of projects that explore notions of waste. So the possibility of making use of biological raw products, mostly residual products or the so-called waste products, the leftover from the agro-industry, as a major resource for activating processes that relate to architectural design and production. And this by preventing to steal from food production itself, of course. And this has allowed to introduce a very, and here I'm showing you just some example of the many out there, to introduce this expanding landscape of natural materials to be used in the design and architecture practice and beyond. So we have been seeing insulation boards from sunflower. We have been seeing different types of bioplastics or hardboard materials from potato peels, and many other different perspectives. In this case, we are looking at a project called Orange Fiber that is transforming different orange and citrus waste into actual fibers for the applications in design, in textile, in fashion, and beyond. And all this based on local bioregional economies. So despite the fact that all this fantastic perspective give birth to a very rich biodiversity of resources, these researches can be seen also as a technical set of solutions to the use of waste, and are not questioning the very agricultural system that generated them in the first place. So if we look again back at the origin, as in a continuous parallel between past and present, as you might have understood, this is very much what we stand for here at dieDAS. It appears that such research and solutions are not providing real alternatives to the environmental impact of monocultural industrial farming. So in some ways, they are sometimes contributing, despite the good that they embed, to confusing people regarding what is real, what is a vision, what is a product, what is a prototype, what is the difference between what is to be considered a renewable resource or what is in fact an extractive resource, despite the natural origin and the fact that generally we as humans tend to have an overall tendency of idealizing the notion of nature. So how did we go about this all here at dieDAS this year? We've been compiling a very dense program that has been filled by prestigious contributions from renewed experts in very many multiple fields, and this functioning as an inspiration and as an input for thoughtful and critical discussions. Within this program, we worked at all times very closely, and this trying to understand also, and that has been mentioned earlier, how to be able to work as a collective. That's never something easy. You cannot just throw a bunch of people in a room and pretend them to act and interact together, despite the fact that we have a very good way to get along with each other. And we started learning also about our different backgrounds, our different sensitivities, and about the different working methods that characterize each of our practices. Going through the program, we kicked it all off with a focus on the historical perspective and connotations that characterize the very location we are residing in. And we thought this would to be very important. In fact, we had the opportunity to host Professor Daniela Spiegel, who we heard earlier on, to gather a thorough understanding of the local context from an historical point of view, and to reflect on notions of inclusivity, polyculturality, equality, globality, openness, in direct contrast to the spirit and the ideology that has been characterizing the very inglorious past and uncomfortable past of the place itself. Following this, we had the opportunity to welcome Professor Diepenbroek, an agricultural scientist and former dean of the Martin Luther University, Halle-Wittenberg, that further fed our eagerness to learn about the local ecosystem and about the current functioning of the agro-industrial activities that are present in this very geographical area, therefore allowing to start an early mapping of the indigenous vegetal species and their uses in contemporary productive frameworks, while also stimulating our curiosity in regard to the possibility of reintroducing ancient old species and cultures whose potential is yet to be fully unraveled simply because they got discarded by the typical and traditional contemporary monocultural practices. And such fundamental introduction has then allowed us to work side by side with designer Eugenia Morpurgo, an Italian designer whose current work is focusing on a long-term research that is titled Syntropic Materials. And it's a research that is fully in line with dieDAS 2020 framework. In fact, a research critiques the very notion of sustainability that inherently tends to take for granted monocultures. And it is a very concrete attempt to design a regenerative natural material production process by combining syntropic agriculture, which is an agroforestry-based regenerative model that was initially thought for food production and that allows to grow multiple cultures in a very resilient manner where the cultures help and support each other, and combining this with the latest development in natural material research. So together with Eugenia, we attempted to develop and to start to establish design-driven methods that could allow tackling the great complexity characterizing such type of ambitious project. As we set our ambition, as we know, and we learned ever more during our stay together, very high, and we are happy to have done so, but we also recognized the challenge that we were facing. And together with her, in fact, also new questions started emerging, and we started mapping and understanding better our needs and ways to actually go about it in a more effective way also for the future of the fellowship itself. Also, we had the pleasure of hosting a contribution from Simone Farresino and Andrea Trimarchi, who together formed the globally renewed designer duo Forma Fantasma. And together with them, we learned about one of their latest projects titled Cambio, which is an ongoing investigation into the extraction, production, and distribution of very natural materials, wood products. And this gave us the chance to understand better the tools, the skills, and the methods that could be used within the development of an extremely articulate project that is tackling the functioning, the functioning of a very complex value chain, which is the one related to the timber industry. And we appreciated also reflecting on the medium as a starting point to reflect on the development of a project and the final goal. In fact, this research project is very much developed in the form of an analytical critique. We could say almost a design brief, rather than trying to attempt to provide solutions, though at the same time being able to question notions related to scale, origin, and exploitations, which are notions that we, of course, very much resonate with here at dieDAS. Furthermore, we had the chance after this to host Alex Marashian, who is a wonderful multifaceted practitioner with a background in philosophy, but and a thorough experience in working as editor and educator across many very different domains in media, in communication and beyond. But more than everything, Alex is a walker. And in fact, with him, we experienced with what a workshop could be as an opportunity to reflect on the act of moving and walking as a fundamental means for fostering a very fruitful creative process where thoughts and intuitions manifest in a different way from how they would usually emerge or not when standing still, as for instance, just by sitting down. And after bridging from research and field work to industry and tech developments, we hosted a contribution from Christoph Wölker and Thomas Waldman from the company Wurt who also were generously providing us with tools for our workshop that the fellows could work with. And we touched upon advanced additive manufacturing techniques and the opportunities that could derive from the merge between the technological innovation and the responsible materials, and how the two, in fact, could be integrated and come along. Another contribution happened yesterday from designer and architect Omer Arbel, who is co-founder and artistic director of the lighting firm Bocci, and is the director of Vancouver-based Omer Arbel office. And Omer presented us a selection of his studio projects that derive from very playful and technological approaches that are led very much by a serendipitous process, inspiring the development of nature-inspired architectures, we could say. And this allowed us to understand the possibilities that exist when working with curiosity and intuition as main tool and driving forces, even when not thoroughly understanding the science and the leading principles in science guiding such processes themselves at an early stage. And finally, and I reserved this also for the end because it was a really important contribution from my point of view, and I believe it was very appreciated by the fellows too, together with renewed architect and professor Alfredo Brillenburg, founder of Urban Think Tank, we were privileged to discuss the notion of scarcity and the very fundamental scope to be found at the basis of the architectural practice. This when working responsibly with architecture as a tool for generating social justice and for effective impact, promoting a factual revolution activated by empowering communities through the development and the donation of systemic frameworks supplied in the real and in the now. So this brought us also to critically reflect on all our perspectives that often are visionary and yet can be seen as tangible but not yet fully manifested, and whose potential would reveal very much in the long term, and to reflect on the most urgent needs in the now, beyond the hypothetical idealization that we as designers sometimes make of the notion of urgency. So if this would not be enough, as you can imagine, this all has been happening in 1 week, while exploring the area and looking for local materials and understanding better what were the indigenous materials we could work with, we were able to dive deeper in the local context. And we were visiting historical sites and local producers, such as a very important local winery, traditional craftsmen. Arne mentioned, in fact, about the brush maker, fascinating historical installation. Also, Professor Spiegel told us about the graduation work and this ingenious structure used for the production of salt from brine extraction. And in general, we got very inspired by such type of historical artifacts that could that are rooted in very low-tech systems and could inform and inspire future generations of fellows, if not us as well, for the design of artifacts in the future. And of course, designing and making at an experimental, factual, or conceptual level have been also part of the experience of working together, functioning as a very fundamental drive and methodology to understand local materials, to understand their potential at a preliminary level, while allowing to leave a mark on site, testifying our passage and collective presence in this very place, and working within the genesis of a much longer trajectory that will characterize dieDAS, and with the intention of activating, in fact, a legacy for the future generations of fellows. So all in all, we feel that our experience here together represents a very, very important groundwork for the future evolution of dieDAS. As in fact, we have seeded ground, mostly metaphorically. We didn't plant seeds effectively yet, but we identified and started to critically analyze regional traditions, crafts, industrial activities, cultural attractions, and this through active mapping, and by developing a local network and the related needed mutual trust with the local population. But ultimately, this, I say it for myself, but I believe it could be shared. It has certainly been a fundamental opportunity for experiencing being together in these very premises and geographical area, and to learn from one another. And now, beyond all my many words, I would finally like to leave the stage again to the four amazing fellows, Svenja, Talin, Sasson, and Basse, sitting here with me, to further look at it from their perspective, to witness some of the work they conducted as collective, and to expand further on the dialogue all together and in direct conversation with the audience and with Glenn and all of you guys. Thank you.
So I think I speak for all of us when I say that we arrived here with a lot of uncertainties that first stem from the current times that we're living in, and also actually just the very place that we're going to be working at, which was paired though with I think with very like an excitement that we were privileged to be the first group of fellows to work on a new future for this place here. And because of those uncertainties, our approach in the beginning was to first listen instead of to immediately start acting, so that we could then later reflect and also define the questions that we would like to ask, and to get in touch with the locality. As Maurizio mentioned already, we had an amazing workshop program, but also we explored the locality through looking at regional crafts, looking at the materials also, and also looking at the history. And through this process, we also already had the intention of finding collaborators for later projects maybe, and to keep a track of our explorations and also of the collaborators, we started a map that is also meant as like an active document that will be passed on to future generations of fellows. So we have this shared document that can help us to understand further the implications of this place. So here you can see the bottom left, it's dieDAS. You have the River Saale right next, flowing by, and the spots that are now marked here are the places that we visited and the people we got in touch with. We already have a much larger list also of possible collaborators, but we decided to now on this map actually stay with the places that we already visited. And already Arne and also Maurizio mentioned the brush maker that we visited in Naumburg, and it was very interesting on the one hand to see this local craft, but also to be confronted with the hardships that the craftsmen have to go through, and the troubles that they're dealing with every day, because it's wouldn't be right to have this very romantic idea of the craft and not to see also the trouble that goes in hand with it. So also those personal stories were really important for us to collect. Another thing that was really interesting to get in to just see, to experience, is actually the graduation tower that has been shown earlier also, because it's a very impressive structure and also inspiring to maybe find different ways of how processes like this, old processes, could be reintegrated into a way of making. And another stop that was really really interesting, and was also the start of our, so to say, material exploration that was happening very intuitively next to the workshop program and next to the exploring actually of the area, was the waste, the byproducts from the Winemakers Association. And we explored those materials very intuitively, and also with the tools that we had, which because of the influx nature also of the place here and the fact that the workshops are not yet finished, actually we had quite a freedom to work with it really with our hands directly on it, and also come up with maybe a dream workshop of how we would like this place to be, because we also see our position actually in now shaping how the place could look like in the future.
Yeah, so we came up with dieDAS. So this is just how this place looks from the bird's eye perspective, and we located different workshops in the architect's house, for example, and into the stable. And here on the picture you can see that actually the garden is a very we imagine that this place will have a garden, and it's actually maybe as important as all the build structures. Yeah, because we are very interested in working with local materials and maybe also growing our own food, but also growing fibers, growing different materials to actually work with. So this is actually the designer's or artist's garden, which is based on different methods. We just chose for now because we were doing this presentation just a couple of hours ago. So not everything is really properly thought through yet. But the dieDAS workshop and the designer's garden especially could be based on syntropic gardening, for example. And we could actually grow plants for dyes and fibers and oils and food and adhesives, glues and plant-based polymers. And then the garage house, which we used now mainly to work in with the materials we had at hand and with the tools we had at hand, we thought like what tools and what workshops and what structures from our all perspectives would be the dream setting for us to work with. And then we came up with general workshops with things like table saws and planers and workbenches, and a ceramic studio with a kiln and wheel and work table and so on, and also a biolab with a heat press and oven and hot plates and so on. And this would be like the more rough workshops that are more that have an access to the outside and to the garden as well. And then the architect's house would contain the more finer work, and it would have a material library, for example, and a clean lab with 3D printers and microscopes and a photo studio, for example. And then it would also have a textile workshop where we could then use the fibers from the garden to spin new materials for weaving, for example, and for knitting, but not only using old techniques, but also bringing in technology.
And with what shop facilities we had, we also strived to make as much as we could while we were here throughout all of the very consistent and inspiring programming. We still found time to go out, collect materials, work with what we had, and try to develop what we could while we were here. So these images illustrate bioplastic, if we could say that, of using a byproduct of the winemaking industry called winestone. It's this crystalline material that is a result of a lower pH balance in the wine. And it's typically used in road making, but not to such great value or great extent. So we thought we'd find greater use in experimenting with it and finding ways of integrating it into a bioplastic that could be used for sculpture or tiling or installation otherwise throughout the site. And beyond working with local industry, we also worked with the local materials that we found on site. We did several experiments in paper making using both natural plants that we found on our property, actually, as well as more byproducts from the wine industry, which were oak shavings and straw sort of fibers that you can see here in these paper samples that we've created. And finally, we also embarked on a woodworking project while we were here, and that the wine producers were kind enough to supply us with the staves from their old oak barrels, which are otherwise sold off after about 30 years of use as a decoration or otherwise disposed of. And this wood is super high quality, very dense, very strong. So we thought we could make something that would last and inspire future generations of dieDAS fellows to work on the site and work with local materials and local industry. So we worked together throughout this process to build a swing, actually, that we installed in the lowest terrace on the site. And I'm happy to see in Dr. Mantrup's provisional plan, at least, that we had similar thinking in this respect, and that area is not going to change, at least in her provisional plan. It's going to stay this garden for contemplation, for leisure, something I think we all sort of pined for while we were here in a very busy program otherwise. And this swing allows us to think about the site and place ourselves in it, not only naturally, but historically, because we are all aware of the history that exists on this site and the architecture that is sort of instrumentalized towards an ideology that we've all tried to move past. But in knowing that history, in trying to understand it, we've also studied a book that Arne was kind enough to add to the growing library at dieDAS, a book about the building here when it was in its early construction, at least. And it's proved to be one of the most inspiring and informative points of reference for the architecture of the book, or of the buildings rather. And in this text, we found various images that we've decided to juxtapose with images of the site as it exists today. And this juxtaposition isn't just sort of an exploration of this uncanny. It's not just to say that we're here now and we also have to confront this past that existed before. It's to say that these realities exist simultaneously, and that when we come here, we can't just acknowledge the past, but we actively live in it. And these photos, I think, helped all of us to see our role in that history and understand how we can begin to move past that instrumentalization of design into something better, something that hopefully serves the world in a different way. And I think Talin will actually walk us through some of the photos and talk about their technical qualities.
Yeah, what's actually very interesting, we kind of like make these parallel where like in the older kind of images, you see like how the images are very polished and very kind of staged and like kind of, it has a stillness to it. While what we're trying to do to kind of bring that element of being playful, kind of bring that nature in, and how it kind of like take again like a place where the shadows are actually being kind of captured. Nothing is kind of, let's say, staged or like polished. So it's just kind of like to celebrate that moment of time of having those kind of layers of the shadow, the nature coming in play. And you kind of like see between these two images how you kind of like see the, I mean, the merge between them in a way where you, between when you're kind of like moving your eyes between these two, you kind of like see there is kind of a way where we're trying to kind of come and see how we can bring back to the place and what can we add and what we can actually question again. Yeah, with all these various kind of setting. Yeah. So if also Susanne, you want to add the ending?
Yeah, and we actually end this presentation with us four sitting on this wing that we built from the barrel materials. And for us, this wing has quite a symbolic meaning because, yeah, we are here in the now in this situation we are in. We were actually swinging back into the past and reflected on what was going on here, but we also look into the future by swinging forward with our four people on this swing, trying to imagine what this place can be like in a couple of years' time. And we actually do that while keeping this lightness that this swing also brings about, because I think this is actually really important to not be put down by the past, but to also keep a lightness and to look into the future. And we also hope to actually leave some inspiration behind for the next fellows to come and to also join the process in several ways. So that was our presentation.
Thank you. Fantastic.